Hi, everyone. Welcome to Empathy by Design by Integrate Trauma Informed Network. This is our, I don't know, we have a lot of podcasts that are rolling out. It's been really cool to be back podcasting again. And kind of, but like staging it kind of from this place of intentional space holding, meets design, meets technology, meets wellness. So it's been a really cool space to like be in. So today we have Sally Miller, who is a yin yoga teacher, and she's going to be talking a little bit about her work as a yin yoga teacher, the yin experiment, which I'm a part of, and I love being a part of Rosie's or no, no, of Sally's classes. And I've been taking Sally's classes on and off since COVID. So it's been super cool. It's been great to like develop like a fun online relationship with Sally. And I love Sally's teaching. She teaches from a very somatic space, which is kind of what Integrate is based off of. So Sally, let's talk a little bit more about your work in the world and your approach to yin yoga and sort of like, yeah, your POV.
Sure. Well, first, thanks so much for having me, Julie. I'm really glad to be here with you today. Um, yeah, I started out as a vinyasa yoga teacher like 20 years ago or so. And I was lucky enough to have a vinyasa yoga teacher who was first and foremost a meditator. And so she taught movement from a really interesting place where there was always meditation in the beginning, always really long shavasana at the end. And even when she spoke, you kind of had this sense that there was a real stillness inside of her. And so, my yoga journey progressed and I eventually learned about yin yoga. And now I only teach yin yoga because I really think that these yin qualities are what are missing, not just in the yoga world. Like I think most people, when they think of yoga, they think of a flow practice or these more active yang postures. But also, so I teach this yin form that's about stillness, but also just in the world, the yin qualities of softness and stillness, receptivity, empathy, feeling content and settled inside yourself, they're so missing. So I really value yin yoga as a personal practice, but feel like it's such an important thing to have available in the world as this sacred space of stillness where we can learn how to be still.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. And it's definitely a good time to be practicing stillness and practicing it within, from this place of body consciousness is where I'm going to start off, being aware of our bodies and where our body is in space and all those things, right? So let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the yin experiment and kind of your framework around how you approach yin. So, the yin experiment is kind of this exploration of rest and receptivity, and I've been a recipient of that. Um, how do you use like these principles that you were talking about with yin yoga, this kind of stillness within, to design your communities, your spaces, because you're on YouTube. And actually, that's not funny. It was on YouTube, I think. Just an FYI. Um, and how do how do you use those philosophies to help, shape and mold empathy with your students?
Yeah. Yeah. So since you invited me to be on the podcast, I've been thinking a lot about empathy. And what's kind of interesting to me is that, as far as I know, there's no Sanskrit word for empathy. And
Hmm.
um, there is a Sanskrit word for compassion, karuna. And compassion is kind of defined, or I define it as the ability to be with someone else's suffering or our own suffering and not try to change it. And so, in my learning about yoga, um, my practice has always been, how can I, at least some of the time, not all the time, but at least some of the time, be with what's going on in myself, be with the uncomfortable stuff that's going on in myself, and not try to immediately fix it. And same with other people. How can I listen to someone complain about something, or my son who's 9, like rage about how much he hates school, and not immediately jump into fixer mode? And so in the yin experiment, and really in all my yin yoga classes, we practice being with ourselves in a posture that may not be comfortable, we know it's safe, right? We learn about the difference between sharp pain, shooting pain, tingling, numbness. Those are considered the unsafe feelings to stay with. The difference between those unsafe feelings and then the feeling of, I don't like this, or it's a dull ache. As you know, I think you teach yin yoga, right? So you know about,
I do.
yeah, yeah, the difference. But the thing is that I think really on a daily basis, at least for me, on a daily basis, that's a real time decision. Like I can understand conceptually, there's things that are safe for me to stay with. There's things that aren't safe for me to stay with. But then when I'm in a yin yoga posture or in a difficult conversation, that's like a real time decision I have to make. Do I have the capacity to be with this really intense discomfort in my knee, or do I need to come out of it and do a more restorative pose or something that just feels more comfortable? So in the yin experiment, in my yin classes, we're navigating this decision-making process. When can I stay with something hard or difficult, and when can I not? And I think what comes of that is actually a lot more resiliency. We learn about the fact that we can be with, like, I can be in a difficult conversation. I can do this podcast even though I'm anxious. I can like try new things even though they scare me. But that feeling of agency and ability for me is only because I practice it in a very safe space. Like when I'm not teaching, I practice in my room. No one else is there. No, there's no judge. No one's looking at me, no cameras. So I sort of build that muscle. And this is what my students get to do at home. You build that muscle um, in a very safe place. So then you can use it in places that feel a bit scarier.
I love that. I love that. And that's like, what we call in, I know you and I have talked about this in the past. I think even probably on our prior podcast that is no longer with us. But uh, but like um uh is that okay, well, we're gonna titrate it. We're gonna like
Yeah.
start here and we're gonna like feel our feelings here. And then we're gonna do it here. And then once I feel I'm not even sure ready is the after once we say built that muscle, then we're gonna try it over here, And I really like that because coming from like a trauma informed angle, I think yin yoga of all the practices, which is what I mean, I know you and I have a similar approach to teaching it, like silent retreats, things like that, which are all great if you have the capacity to do it, is the best way I can say it. But it's like sometimes it can be a little bit like it's a lot, it can be a lot. And that's what I think it's great about online stuff and like why I refer people, especially trauma survivors, if they're going to explore it, to do it online
Mhm.
because of what you just said. You're in your room, you're on your own, you can come in and come out. There's no you don't have to deal with the social pressure, which is a whole other added
Yes.
thing that can happen in studios.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah. And that you can keep your camera off, doesn't matter what you look like. You can skip things. Like I'm always encouraging people to take breaks. Like if I demonstrate a pose and they don't want to do it, they just skip it. And I'm not going to be seeing them. I don't even know. Whereas if you're in a studio, when I taught in person, I would also always give that invitation. But there is that social pressure. Even if you don't want to be that way, you want to be like impervious to what people think of you. We all have it. So at home, it's such a nice option.
No, I think it's great. I think that's one of the best things about if we're gonna get into that stuff. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, like we have an app, as I was like, well, if we're all just gonna be doing this online, we might as well just have an app to do this, you
Mhm.
know? So because so many people, because we do go deep into things and people expect us to go deep into things. Integrate is not a brand that is surface level at all.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, if we're going to be surface level, we're going to have to be able to do this with our agency, with our stuff. So it says a lot about the online design piece as well, which is something that, that I, especially with another part of my work, but I think that that's important to your work, with yin is okay, well, how are we going to be with our bodies in a way that's asynchronous? I can get to it easily
Mhm.
and no one's watching me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the beauty of COVID. Like the one beautiful thing of COVID is we figured this out as a society.
Mhm.
None of us were the same. um, So let's talk a little bit and on that note. So somatics emphasize this like body mind
Mhm.
connection,
Mhm.
okay, which is great. And so it's something that I am constantly exploring. I'm re-exploring with a different teacher this summer, which I'm excited about. Have you heard of Liz Arch's work, by the way? I keep on
No.
asking. You would really like her work. I think that you would love it. I keep thinking about it. I was like, Sally would love her work.
Mhm.
Anyway, I'm doing one of her trauma alchemy things where she goes through polyvagal theory and different kinds of somatics.
Mhm.
But in terms of yin yoga, one thing about that is how can somatic practices guide creators, yoga teachers in general, like yeah, let's say yoga teachers, healers, in because I know people that use yin yoga, like I know massage therapists that will use yin yoga as a part of their massage practice. They'll put people in yin
Mhm.
yoga shapes, especially if they're doing more dynamic like massage patterns. Um, how can people stay grounded like in their human experience while thinking through yin in this more dynamic way, not just in a yoga studio, but like as a part of this more of an integrated practice. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I think all of us, no matter what our profession, really need practices to ground ourselves.
Hmm.
That there's just so much distraction and so much technology that takes our attention up and out. And for me, understanding the philosophy of yin and yang has really helped. So I would almost start there by saying that somatics in general, like these are broad strokes, but in general, is about revaluing yin. It's
Right.
we could say that yin is the body. If we're going to make just some big comparisons, we could say yin is the body and yang is the mind, and they're
Mhm.
intimately connected. We can't separate them, of course. But we all know the experience of when we're really in our body and we're really relaxed compared to
Mhm.
when we're really in our head and we're overthinking, right? And and so we can use yin and other somatic practices to come back to this part of ourselves that's so easy to lose in our world today. It's like we just lose it. We lose the connection to our body when we're typing on our computer and we're really thinking about making content or whatever. We also lose the connection. I've had this experience, and many of my students have too, if we're body workers or therapists of one kind. We lose our connection to ourselves because we're just paying attention to the other. We're working on the other's body or we're listening to the other's feelings. And it's so easy to just let all our attention go out. So in my teaching, I talk about these five essentials, these five different um, I would call them dharana. The Sanskrit word is dharana practices, but they're meditative
Mhm.
practices, one-pointed concentration practices that you can do for 20 minutes, like a, you know, official meditation, or you can do for 10 seconds. And it's feel your feet. So you go down, you ground yourself by feeling the thing that's closest to the ground, which is often the feet. You relax your tongue, you relax your face, you relax your belly. And then the last one is you look for the yin breath, which is a bit more complicated. We can talk about that if you want or not. But
Y-
yeah.
Yeah, I would love to hear the yin breath on that because we actually do something, and we call it something different,
Hmm.
but I actually refer to it as the yin breath from your
Oh, good.
classes.
Hmm.
But I was like, we call it more breath awareness, but it's just noticing the body is breathing you. I'm like,
Hmm.
it's all coming from the same space. It's all coming from, the yin space. So I would, and it's a practice we do in our app. So I would love to hear from your perspective that more what we call like how I cue it, the body breathing you or
Hmm.
noticing just the natural inhales and exhales. So how do you frame that from like the yin perspective?
Hmm. Yeah. So I would say the yin breath is the natural breath that happens when we're not stressed or anxious. And we all do it every day. When we're really relaxed, we do it. And we do it when we're sleeping, if we're not having a bad dream or something. And you could observe it. In my yin yoga teacher trainings, I would do a lot of teaching about the yin breath and how to instruct it. And and even people who've been doing yin yoga for many, many years still struggle to find the feeling of the yin breath. It
Mm-hmm.
requires so much relaxation. And so many of us have so much anxiety. So I would say if you could observe a baby breathing when they're sleeping, or a child, or really, an adult, I guess. But I guess it's more normal to think about watching a baby breathe than like your partner. You watch someone breathe when they're really relaxed, and you see, like, really using your eyes to watch. How does the belly move? When the human body is really relaxed, how does the belly move? And then in the yin yoga practice, we try to allow our belly to move that way, which when we get it, it feels amazing. It's like the most pleasurable way to breathe. And it's quite different than how people usually learn yogic breathing, right? The ujjayi breathing, where you breathe in through your nose and out through your nose or your mouth, and it's louder and longer. The yin breath is really short. It's shallow, but it's an indication that you feel safe and at ease in yourself. So I mean, for me, learning the yin breath and practicing it on a regular basis, um, it's really so healing.
That's wonderful. I think that's great. And I really like how you frame it, because I think that lots of times, at least from like a trauma informed lens, lots of times we come in and people are like ready to do big breathing. And I was like, actually, we're just gonna like just notice
Mm-hmm.
your natural breath.
Yeah.
Like that's all it is. Like that's all we're doing, is we're just gonna notice that. And it is so helpful, especially if you're carrying. I mean, I don't know of anyone who isn't carrying a lot of trauma right now. Not to like normalize it, but like different degrees, different spectrums of it in our bodies. It's just the trauma load is very high. And so just to try to acknowledge that when I can. Um, and so, I think that it's really can be like, at least for me, like when I was learning breath work and a lot of these practices, and as I was training to be a yoga teacher, it was a lot of like, oh, it's one more thing I have to do. Oh, I have to sit down and I have to do pranayama. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's actually a lot of good research around how pranayama actually can help, depending on what degree of the nervous system you're in, you know.
Yeah.
But the cool thing of that reframe is watching the breath awareness, the watching about your body breathe you, is that you don't have to do anything. And if for anyone that's ever carried a whole lot of shit in their nervous system, learning that you don't have to do one more thing can be really freeing. So that's what I love about that perspective, and what I always got from like your practices and your classes is that yin breathing. I was like, oh, good, okay, cool. I think like the most intense I think I've ever done with you was like ujjayi.
Yeah.
Like that's about as much as we did. Like, which is great. Like that's like great for me. So let's talk a little bit about something you say a lot in your classes. And I love when you say this. We call it pausing to feel. So this seems really essential when we start talking about like empathy, right? How can we intentionally integrate this concept in the way that we like hold spaces, okay? Like pausing to feel, right? Like, how do we bring that from your practice? Like, let's say someone was going to be like, okay, I took Sally's class, I loved it. How do I pause to feel in my day-to-day life?
Well, there's so many opportunities. I think that's the first thing I want to say, is that we could pause before we get in our car, and before we drive, we just pause for like 2 breaths. We could pause for a minute before we get out of bed. We could pause before we hop on a podcast. We could pause before we respond to a text message. Like, the way I live is, after feeling the benefit of pausing in a yoga class, I now try to pause a lot in my everyday life. So I think it like the possibilities are endless of where we can pause.
I'm not pausing at a dramatic. Sorry, it was not planned. I was thinking about pausing though, and how I was in a group last week with some other like healers, and we were talking about pausing. Okay, this is not at all in our script, by the way. I'm just going off script. Okay.
Yeah.
but and I was a two therapists and and I was just on as like a mental health product person that had that with a yoga teaching background, and I was just on this talk, and we were talking about pausing
Hmm.
and everyone's different relationships to the pause. And of course, the therapists were like, "Yeah, we
Hmm.
love the pause because
Right.
that's when we can tell that people are uncomfortable, and like that's and we don't have to do as much work because they're doing the work for us." Anyway,
Mm.
it was great. It was hilarious. They all loved it, and like everybody else was like, really uncomfortable when it got quiet. So we had this whole conversation about quiet and pausing, which
Mhm.
I just modeled by default. Did not mostly because I dropped into my head a little bit. But like, but but in thinking about pausing to feel, what is your like relationship to long pauses? Empathically thinking here, like with conversation, like what is your relationship to pausing, like when you're in group situations or when you're in dynamics, maybe versus with yourself, like pausing with yourself versus pausing, like what I just, yeah, just stop talking. What is your like response to that? Like, how do you, like, what do you notice inside?
Mhm. Well, now I think I'm really blessed because a lot of my friends I've known for a long time, and do feel comfortable pausing with them. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from clients and people I've worked with about the way that I speak and the way I show up in conversation. Like people have told me they like that I will model slower speech and taking pauses before answering questions. Um, and so I have, I think, 95% of the time, this really, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I think pauses are so precious. I'm really comfortable in them. I love them. I wish there were more. Like it's most of the time really wonderful for me. Like I can feel in the silence that I have some space. I love that feeling of spaciousness rather than rushing. When I was growing up, my dad always rushed my mom and always rushed me. And so it took me probably until like my mid 30s to know what it felt like not to rush myself. Um, and so this not rushing part has been huge for me. So now that I'm 43, I just cherish it so much. There still is, of course, some time. Like I was just having a conversation on the phone with my ex-husband, and we were disagreeing about something regarding our child's education. And I could tell, like, well, we both took a pause, and he doesn't pause very much. So it was uncomfortable for me. And we didn't say, now we will pause. Like, we just got to this point in the conversation where we're both so pissed, right? We're like really heated. And then we didn't have anything else to say. And I was like, okay, inside, I'm telling myself, I'm going to pause to feel because I don't want to like say something I don't mean or hurt him.
Right.
And it was so uncomfortable. So, of course, sometimes it's still so uncomfortable. And I felt my heart racing and my mind was really racing. I wasn't enjoying the pause. I was like, this sucks. I want to say something. I don't know what to say. Um, and it was awkward as hell, you know? So,
Yeah.
and I think what my students have said is that for the most part, they're in that space. It just feels awkward. There hasn't been enough practice in pausing or enough people in their lives that also are willing to do it or interested in doing it. So they just default to the status quo, which is you always fill the space with something. You fill it with talking, you fill it with music, you fill it with television, like you always fill it with something. And so, of course, like I try to always say in in yoga classes, like pausing to feel even just for 10 breaths in a yoga class can be really, really hard. We're just not used to doing it. And
Yeah.
and same thing, you might, after this podcast or after many years of taking yin yoga classes or meditating or something, feel like, okay, now I'm ready to bring this into my everyday life. Now I'm ready to try to pause in my next difficult conversation. And it will probably feel awful. It will feel like
Mhm.
the wrong thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the thing about like in pausing in those more challenging conversations, I think Well, like you said, what was your primary relationship to silence when you were a kid? What was your relationship to silence when you were a kid? Because I actually, ironically, I literally right before this video recorded another somatic class for our app, ironically, like an hour before I got on here. And
Mhm.
I literally like cued people. This was not planned. This was just on target with the times, I think. But I was like, okay, we're gonna get quiet for 30 seconds because typically in trauma informed yoga, like quiet can be a lot of things. And so I always try to we start with like 30 seconds. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna do 30 seconds of just quiet, turn some music on, you know,
Yeah.
whatever you need to do for, I'm not cueing you for 30 seconds. Okay. And um, anyway, my initial thought to that is just how people's relationship to pausing and feeling like it can just really stir up a lot of stuff. Like you said, it can be really uncomfortable. And it's also what people, if you're a therapist, therapists really like it. And it can also stir up lots of things. So I think it's always a really interesting space to see. And it can change depending on who you're with. Like I'm cool pausing in your in your yin classes. I'm cool pausing here.
Mhm.
But, if I want to prove a point and I want to be, and I have an agenda to say and I have things to say,
Yeah.
like I'm a Gemini rising. I come with an, I have things.
Yeah. You want to
And I can do,
communicate. Yeah.
I'm gonna over communicate until I get to the, till we get to like the roots. And not many people want to do that. And luckily I'm married to a Gemini too. So like we
Oh,
just,
nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
lots of air. Um, luckily there's lots of air between us. But like to handle that. But yeah, it depends on who I'm with. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I do really find those points where it does get quiet. I think that I really, as someone that is communicatively, I can communicate and over communicate and talk through things, words, whatever. I do appreciate even having space where I'm like, and I don't have to work for you because I tend to, if someone is pausing, I have to be like, okay, are you like anxious? Do I have to go talk? Am I going to over talk for you?
Yeah.
So, here I am on a podcast, but like, where we talk. But I really appreciate like those pauses because for the over communicators, the wordy people, it also gives us the time to be like, okay, so you don't have to work hard. You don't have to feel seen in that. You don't have to move into talking to be seen. You can pull back and
Mhm.
be seen in certain situations as well.
It's so rare.
So,
I think a lot of us feel like we don't have much energy, we're tired, and we know lots of ways to boost our energy, or that we should sleep more, or maybe we should change our relationship with caffeine. There are like all these ways that we hear about or we try to get more energy or balance our energy or whatever. But actually, the pause is a way of conserving your energy. It's so deeply therapeutic. And I think, yeah, for me, it's almost like a whole new way of life to orient to the inner world. When you pause, it's not just quiet, right? It's not just that you're quiet, it's that you're reorienting. You're reorienting to the inner world. And that
yeah,
conserves a lot of prana and a lot of energy. And for me, it took a long time to understand that. Like, I didn't understand in the beginning of my yoga journey that you could you could be always oriented to the other. I just thought that was life, I just thought
right,
that was what you do. And then I
right.
had one teacher who really modeled this. And I knew I liked being around her. I didn't quite know how to put it into words, but I knew I enjoyed being around her. Um, and then one day she said it. She like said the secret. She said, you try to have 70% of your attention inside all throughout the day. And that completely blew my mind. Like, I think, and this was this might have been 5 years ago that I got this teaching. So I'd already been doing yoga for a very long
Mhm.
time. No one ever said that to me. And I think at that point, maybe I had like 1, 2% of my attention inward throughout most of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely wasn't a majority. It wasn't more than 50%. And that she was giving permission to have 70% of our attention in here. And that I could see through her example that living that way didn't make you selfish. It didn't make you cut off from other people. In fact, I could see it was making her a better listener. It was making her um, an example of centeredness and presence and like all this good stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because that was really transformative for me that we can have more attention turned inward um, than maybe we ever considered.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think yeah, I think there's a lot of, I think there's a lot. I mean, and that goes back to like the yin thing, right? Is like creating that space within you to be able to build like a container for that to be safe enough, as we
Mhm.
call it, in some, for that to be a safe enough
Mhm.
experience, is part of the work,
Yeah.
is to make that, um, part of the thing. And I think that's great. I think that's a really great, I think that's a really great goal. And I mean, I really attribute to that because I was even thinking this morning, I just had a really busy morning. It just kind of all added up to today. Like I had tons of meetings today. It just sort of, I don't know, everyone on my calendar kind of, it's today, you know? And I woke up earlier just so I could lay on my couch by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, listening to like I listened to like some, I don't know, I was listening to like some like meditation, and
Mhm.
I was like, this feels really good. I
Yeah.
was like, I just need to be, like, my husband was like inside and all that stuff, but I was like, I just need to be by myself on my couch, not doing anything. And I did an hour and I felt really good. And I have a big day and I thought today was going to be exhausting, but it's actually not
Yeah.
because I gave myself an extra hour.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Good job.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. Okay, so any final thoughts on empathy, pausing to feel somatics?
Yeah, one last thing I just wanted to say, it's kind of an obvious thing, Julie, but um, that empathy is a feeling. We can talk about empathy a lot and conceptualize it and be pro empathy, but it's a feeling. And so if we don't have tools for coming back to feeling, for dropping our thoughts and feeling, we're not going to be able to embody empathy. And I notice in myself that um, the times when I can't access empathy, like my mind might say, this is a good time to be empathetic. Um, but I'm not feeling it. What I'm actually feeling is anger. And that I
Good
think
point.
I think empathy is kind of like the underbelly of anger. And so um, we all, I mean, I think so many people have a really twisted relationship with anger. And this was in one of
Mhm.
your previous podcasts. I love listening to about conflict resilience. I think that's
Oh, you listened to me and Ruth?
yeah, it was
What?
amazing.
Oh, that's so great because she just asked me yesterday if I had any feedback, and I was like, "Well, I got lots of questions, but you're the
I
first
loved
statement."
it. I
Okay, good.
absolutely loved it. And as I was listening, I was like, yes, yes, yes. And I was so excited to talk about anger because he also spoke about it. And I feel like it is our twisted and sometimes shameful relationship with anger that actually prevents us from feeling empathy. And anger is such a very real, very common universal emotion that, we'd have to first admit. A lot of us don't want to admit that we're angry. Maybe we
Hmm.
can admit that we're angry at the world, but like admitting in an intimate relationship or with our children or with our coworkers that we're angry, we shy away from that, right?
Right.
We'd have to admit it. Then we'd have to turn toward it in a somatic
Hmm.
way for it to liberate. And then,
Ooh, that's uncomfortable too.
oh, it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so uncomfortable. But then what happens is it liberates and empathy just reveals itself. It just comes like the flip side. Uh, Just like,
Yeah.
you know, in my training, my meditation training, which was very somatic and very like all about emotions. It was about how turning toward the uncomfortable emotion reveals the really pleasant, beneficial, comfortable emotion. That there's really no way to cultivate more empathy without looking at our anger. Um,
Oh yeah, because anger is always um, how do I say this? It's always, I always say it's always a catalyst to grief. It's always like the emotion on the way to something, another, lots of times not really great feeling, but like,
Right.
but it's usually grief, it's sadness or
Mhm.
something like that. Sometimes it's anger and then it moves into some of those deeper subterranean feelings like grief and, pain and frustration and, disappointment. But it starts with anger. And I think it's really important. That's why whenever it's really funny because I think Ruth is actually the one that pointed it out, but it reminded me of things I do. Someone will be like, "Are you angry?" I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, you are."
Right. I know. It's so hard. It's so hard to say yes. It's so hard.
I'm like, when do I actually say that I'm angry socially? I do say it to my husband, I'll say it to my daughter, you
Mhm.
know. But I was like, what if I said it to my friend? Actually, socially, I'm like way not great at this. I'll be like, I'm not mad. I'm like, yeah, you're totally pissed off. Really. I will even see it in my head. I'll be like,
Mhm.
do you hear yourself lying?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so common. Let's just all start saying when we're really angry. We need to make a pact. We're all gonna do it.
Yeah, because if we just said like, yeah, I'm angry and I need some space. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, like, I think that, my friends and I do that to a certain degree. I was like, we have some pretty good people around us
Yeah.
that do that. But I mean, like, but I have to like work though. Sometimes I'll say I'm not angry, then I'm like, actually, that's not true.
Yeah. Totally.
Let me circle back to that for a second.
Yes.
and and actually, I am angry, obviously, and anyway, and I think that, but if that's my default, I'm not mad. Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you are. You've had enough therapy, Julie. That you're absolutely angry. Like, we can identify that,
Right.
you know? Um, but it is socially, because I think, especially among women identifying, I think that it can be hard to socially engage that you're angry at a friend. You know what I mean? Especially
Mhm.
if there's, I don't know, who knows why. But like, I think it can be hard to be like, yeah, I'm angry at that person. And I love them and I'm angry, you
Mhm.
know? And I think that there's something safe enough is when you can do that. And you're like, hey, yeah, I'm angry. And I need to pause, or what I call a compassionate pause
Mhm.
is we need compassionate pauses so I can feel my anger, move through what I need to do through before I can re-engage. And I think that that's a whole other pause to feel
Yes.
experience as well. Well, awesome, Sally. Well, thank you so much for coming. So where can people find you and your work and all those things?
Yeah, it's all on my website, sallymilleryoga.com. And there's lots of on-demand classes there and self-paced courses on different topics. I have a 4-part Yin Yoga for Anger series, actually.
Awesome.
Really good. And lots of stuff for anxiety. And everything includes, like, pretty much all my classes are 1 hour. And everything includes a somatic meditation and um, pausing to feel. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I hope you get off this podcast, Sally, and everybody listening, and have a moment to pause to feel, maybe with some tea and some food, my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sally. And we'll get off here in a second. So thanks, everyone. I will stop the recording.